This is Mr. Argyle. I'm just going to finish going through the PowerPoint that we were talking about yesterday, just to make sure that you get everything that you need. So today we're just going to finish up. Ended yesterday talking about microphones, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about them. So the sound designer has to think really hard about two kinds of devices. We have outputs and inputs. An output is anything that produces sound. For example, the voice that I'm currently using to speak produces sound. Some other examples are the speakers in the auditorium. We have three main speakers. We have the speaker on the left, the speaker in the center, and the speaker on the right. Those can all produce sounds. We can also usually consider canned music as a device that produces sound. So canned music, that is specifically recorded music, so like what you could play out of an aux cord or a CD. If we had like a live concert going on and there were instruments on the stage, for example, a cello or violin, those would also be music outputs. As compared to inputs, which is anything that takes in sound. So for example, the audience's ears is an input device because we're putting sound into them. Another kind of device that usually has sound going into it is microphones. People frequently kind of think that microphones are an output device because they can produce sound. The thing is, the only kind of sound that a microphone will produce without someone speaking into it is feedback, which is that kind of loud sound that you can hear. It usually is because two microphones are pointed at each other when they shouldn't be, or they're picking up the sound of a speaker. It means that you don't have a good sound system. That's what that means. But yeah, a microphone is an input device as opposed to an output device. Another place where sound goes into that doesn't come out is the soundproofing insulation, which we pointed out yesterday. It's the orange and wood paneling in our auditorium. We talked about microphones the other day. There are three kinds: the wired microphones, the wireless microphones, and the lavalier microphones, which are the kinds that go on a person. They all transmit into the soundboard, which someday, when they put the railings in the auditorium, I will take you up to go look at. Until then, we will just do without it. Notice here we also said, what is speaker feedback? That is when a microphone is picking up a speaker or another microphone, and then it just amplifies the same sound until it's really, really loud and kind of uncomfortable to listen to. All right. Here we are, we're talking about music. There are two different kinds of music that you need to think about in theater specifically. And I'm not talking about genres of music, right? Different genres of music make sense in different places in theater, but they all function the same way. There are two major words I want you to know when it comes to music. It's diegetic music and underscoring or incidental music. Incidental usually refers to things like sound effects, as opposed to underscoring, which talks more about music. But for intents and purposes, they mean the same things. Diegetic music is the kind of music that the character themselves can hear. So think about a movie or a TV show where you have a scene and the characters are doing the scene and there's a song playing in the background. And then all of a sudden, the characters turn off the radio and the music stops. In that case, that is what's called diegetic music. Because the character themselves on stage could hear it, it's diegetic. Now compare that to underscoring. Underscoring is music that only the audience can hear. So if, for example, in our clips we were watching yesterday, the Star Wars scene, we had the diegetic sounds, which were the sound effects, but the underscoring, the triumphant music, the characters themselves probably couldn't hear. They weren't playing it through a sound system. It was just there for the audience to influence mood. Yeah, so that's underscoring. Incidental sounds kind of function the same way. They're things that the audience can hear that the characters wouldn't hear. A good example of incidental sound that pops up a whole lot is a lot of times when you're watching a clip of someone pulling out a knife to attack someone or defend themselves, you will hear what sounds like metal scraping on metal. when you pull a knife out of a sheath, you don't always hear that sound effect, even though it's usually there for like comedic effect or just to tell you what's going to happen. Audiences expect it, so they're just generally there. But yes, they are generally added there by the sound designer. Another really good example is things like when a very attractive cartoon character pops up on a screen, and then all of a sudden you hear like a like sound that nobody's necessarily whistling that, but they've added it there as an incidental sound to emphasize to the audience something about that character. So that's kind of the difference there. There's also two other major kinds of sound that are added to theatrical productions. Sound effects. It's usually called Foley sound, which is named after a guy named James Foley, who really started in the movies. Sometimes the characters are doing things that don't produce a loud enough sound, or we want to emphasize something about the scene. We add sound effects. For example, a ringing telephone or a doorbell. Usually it's not a character ringing the doorbell or actually calling another character on stage. It's usually a sound effect added after the fact or through the booth to make that actually happen. The other really important kind of sound is atmospheric sound, also known as a soundscape. It's sound to fill the world. Think about going to a grocery store or the beach. You would expect certain sounds while you're there. For example, if you're at the grocery store, there's usually music playing over the speakers. There's people talking, people pushing their shopping carts. Those sounds needed to be added in the theater. For example, if you only had two characters on stage, you would have to add those sounds to make it feel more realistic for the audience. Similarly, if you were at the beach, you would have to add the sounds of waves, because in a theater, we're in a room, which isn't necessarily at the beach itself. So you just have to add those in to make a more full, realistic experience for your audience. And that is part of the job of the sound designer. In fact, that is the job that you will be doing next week. So get excited for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let me know if you have any questions. You're more than welcome to reach out to me via email or reach out to Mr. Ashcraft via email if you have any question about any of this stuff here.